Family, we have reached the end of the longest, shortest week in recent memory in a while. Welcome to Stir Crazy, episode 43. We can't breathe. If you're mentally exhausted from the collective trauma that we have all been sharing over the past several days, trust me, you are in a very safe space right now. I'm your host, Kim Brown. Great show coming up today. Of course, we're going to be talking about the latest coming out of Minneapolis. I'm sure you've heard by now. An arrest has been made, but as we know from experience, and this not being our first rodeo, we know that arrest does not necessarily equal justice for the family of George Floyd, but we're going to discuss it and get into it. And it's been going down pretty much all around the country. Protests in Louisville, Kentucky turned a little violent with 7 people shot. Unclear who fired the shots. You know, we can't rule out certain people. And if you watch this show, you know who I'm talking about when I say certain people. It went down in Colorado, Los Angeles. The people have had enough and are fed up and are taken to the streets to make their voices heard loudly once again. And what we're also going to do here on the show, we're going to take a little bit of a retrospective and look back, because clearly this is not the first time that American cities have gone up in flames as a result of marginalized communities being fed up with the abuse and the violence and the murder that has come at the hands of the state. So we're going to get into that as well. Plus, coming up on the show, we know that law enforcement and police are emboldened very much by the man in the White House. Donald Trump has been using his Twitter account to incite violence against a variety of folks over a duration of time. But he has been talking super extra crazy from his Twitter account over the past couple of days, even to the point where Twitter had to flag some of his tweets. Twitter finally did something about Donald Trump using his bully pulpit to incite violence against Black folks, basically, in this instance. But I'm not sure if that's actually going to be enough. And Donald Trump is also striking back against Twitter for taking any sort of action against him. We're going to get into that as well. Now, as always, we definitely want to hear from you and in the comments and in the chat. And listen, we know the past few days, we know the trolls have found their way into our chat, but we just like to preemptively say, fuck them Bamas, okay? And if y'all see them, collect them, okay? Get them all the way together. And if y'all don't get them together, James, our social media guy, he's going to bounce them up out of here. So just be aware, we know that this is happening. But right now, it's time to bring in our great panel. We like to introduce our guy, Taure Brown, sociologist, joining us today from North Carolina. Eze Jackson. If you are a longtime viewer of The Real News, you recognize Eze Jackson, recording artist and activist out of Baltimore. Adriel Hampton joining us again on Stir Crazy's political consultant for the left. And we are so happy and so honored to be joined by a very special guest, former Black Panther, political prisoner, and host of the show Rattling the Bars. Eddie Conway joins us today from Baltimore, Maryland. Panel, thank you all for being here on this trying Friday. This has been an exhausting week, and I've been at home and I've been watching everything that's been happening in Minneapolis and other places, from a distance, and it's still, mentally draining. So we appreciate all of you joining us today.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. Yeah.
So we're gonna start off with the breaking news, obviously, that the former Minneapolis police officer, Darren Colvin, has been arrested. They took him into custody this afternoon. He's being charged with third-degree murder and manslaughter in the murder of George Floyd. The video that has been widely circulated, re-traumatizing everybody in the process. But, sometimes we do have to view these things. Eze Jackson, I want to start with you because you were out in the streets 5 years ago during the Baltimore uprisings in the murder of Freddie Gray by Baltimore police. I know a lot of this looks very familiar.
Yeah, for sure. It's all very familiar. I was just telling some friends the other day, I was like, the voices in Minneapolis sound very similar, almost chillingly similar. And that is the frustration that boiled up to getting to this point. Um, before Freddie Gray happened, we had cases like Anthony Anderson and Tyrone West, where these guys were murdered by police and nothing happened. Even the stories had been kind of swept under the rug. And to this day, Tawanda Jones is still fighting for justice for Tyrone West, her brother. The family of Anthony Anderson still fighting for justice. And when Freddie Gray happened, it was like, the straw that broke the camel's back. And I can hear that in Minneapolis. With this arrest of the officer, I think we have to pay very close attention to what happens from here. Because just like in Baltimore, it's just an arrest. And if you remember, Marilyn Mosby, the state attorney, came out and charged the officers right away because of the outcry from the public, put charges on all of the officers. And of course, they ended up walking free. So this is only, one step, but it shouldn't have even took this much for them to charge the officer.
Taure, I know that you have been participating widely in the conversation that's been happening in social media spaces. And, again, we've seen a lot of this play out. Very seldom are police officers held accountable in any way for the taking of a Black or brown or indigenous life. And we have seen it in some instances, not many convictions, a handful of arrests. I can only really think of a couple of convictions. One was the cop in South Carolina, was it Taure, who killed Walter Scott? He's in jail right now.
Mm-hmm.
But not many others. What is your take on the latest that's been happening regarding the death and the murder of George Floyd?
Well, I mean, I just have to say, first of all, that I'm just so proud and inspired by the people on the ground there, right, who are saying, look, enough is enough. And we're going to stand up and we're going to, do whatever we need to do to bring some attention to this case. So I've just been inspired, even though, it has been very trying times, right? I'm trying not to get myself bogged down in our deaths, because if you're really paying attention to what goes on to us every day, we're dying every day. It may not be in such dramatic fashion through the TV, but if you're looking at raw what happens to us on the day in and day out, we're dying on that day every day. So I carry the same rage as everybody else, but I'm trying to keep or develop or even something about like some type of revolutionary optimism, right? Because I mean, what we're seeing around us is a system in crisis, and which is a good thing and a dangerous thing at the same time. It's a good thing because now we can see something beyond the horizon. We can see like, yo, we do not have to live like this. And people, you're seeing that in the streets. They're saying, yo, we ain't got to live like this. And they're standing up for that. So I'm inspired by them, and I'm just looking forward to people seeing what's going to look like in the future. But as far as the criminal justice system being able to dole out any accountability to the police, I don't look to those systems to do that because they're not designed to. So the arrest is just about calming the rage of the folks and trying to portray like the system can actually address the problems when it can.
Yeah, that's what it seemed like a lot to me, that while these charges against this officer are certainly deserved, the reason that they even came in the first place was to sort of calm down the anger of the people in the streets in Minneapolis. And Eddie Conway, I got to tell you, when I saw the video of that police station, the 3rd precinct in Minneapolis, go up in flames, I said, "Oh, turn that up! I love that song. That's my favorite. I want to hear that go all the way up." But Eddie, I know that you were in Baltimore, 1968. My mother talks to me about the uprisings in '68 in Baltimore. Can you connect some historical threads to us between what you saw then, what happened, for example, in LA in '92, what happened again, Baltimore 2015, and then what we've been witnessing in recent days?
Yeah, I think that under all of this, since the first ship sailed from Africa, there's always been this tension, rage, hostility, and it's just under the surface of every person of color that's been exploited, that's been whipped, beat, raped, robbed, and that exists, and we know it. We know we don't get justice. We know that the system only is concerned about protecting the property of the wealthy. And so I think even when Martin Luther King in '68 was assassinated, it didn't take much for the whole nation. In fact, there was over 100 cities exploded. It looked like a war zone here in America. I was out on the street at that time myself, and I noted law enforcement agents from 6 different organizations was on top of Baltimore City: the federal government, the state police, the county police, the park police, the city police, and human resources. I can't even think of all 6 of them, but they sat on top of Baltimore. But the reality is that the rage was so intense that it was nothing that could be done. I think in '92 and I believe '95 also, after the trial, people in LA and between '68 and the '90s, there was a number of riots and incidences. And one of the things that happened, and a lot of people don't realize it, is that besides all the ways that we do die, and we do die in all of those kind of ways every day in inordinate numbers, what happens is that almost everybody in some Black community experience an incident like this in their life. The children experience it, the siblings experience it, the adults experience it. This happens over and over again. Every 12 hours, a person of color is killed by law enforcement, correctional officers, or security people. Every 12 hours in the United States of America, a person of color is killed. And so that exposes the whole entire community to this kind of behavior. And our stress level is there, it's right under the surface. Our muscles are tight, as Frantz Fanon says, and it doesn't take much to bring out that rage. But I will say this: the rage is good, and it's enlightening, and it makes you feel good. But in order for us to move forward, be proactive, we need to be thinking in terms of organizing self-defense groups for the community, just to make sure people in the community are safe. The Panthers were trying to do that, and of course we got attacked and murdered and in jail. But at the same time, it needs to happen. People need to decide that they're going to protect their community. And we can't keep reacting after the fact of somebody being killed. We need to start being proactive.
Adriel, for the first time that I can recall, and I'm certainly not the all remembering kind of person, but the comments made by Minneapolis Mayor Jacob Frey was the first that I can remember seeing a white politician openly wonder why police had not been arrested in one of these types of incidents. The governor of Minnesota spoke today, and he also acknowledged the long history of police brutality against communities of color in Minneapolis, in St. Paul area. In your opinion, is the conversation and the messaging, the language, especially used by white politicians in this time, are we seeing a potential shift there where there was, I wouldn't say a denial, but now so there's more of an acknowledgement? And also conversely, I didn't hear from the mayor and the governor, anything about, we're standing by law enforcement and, we support the police, like these general, like, proclamations that are predictable about how they are standing shoulder to shoulder with cops in during this time, and we're going to get to the bottom of the truth. Are we seeing a shift in how these politicians are dialoguing and speaking about these kinds of incidents?
Yeah, I think that one of the big things is since Ferguson, Black Lives Matter has actually been a pervasive topic that Americans have had to think about and talk about, right? In everything from social media to conversations with peers and colleagues at work. And because it's entered mainstream dialogue, these issues that have been going on for generations, and because now these white politicians who normally might have come straight out of, the police union elects a lot of politicians, right? It's a very common thing. Police are big political donors. I don't know these politicians well enough to know if they have ties to the police unions or whether they're more independent. But what you see is when this George Floyd's death being broadcast on social media, reaching millions and millions of people around the country and getting into all of the mainstream news, makes these guys have to question whether they're loyal to the cops or whether they're loyal to actual public sentiment. And so I think one of the things we're starting to see is that when you have, there's a lot of oppressed people in America right now. And when they can all see what's going on, especially to Black men who've been historically one of the worst oppressed and continue to be one of the worst oppressed, and it's all in public. It reminded me of seeing the Standing Rock situation and just people watching on Facebook. And this was Unicorn Riot, which does this incredible work documenting the protests and getting them into the live streams, because it's hard. The cops try to jam your stuff, right? They don't want this out there. But getting it out there, I feel like this is bigger than Ferguson in the national consciousness already, faster. And what happens next, I think, is really up to the organizers, doing the work on the streets.
And thank you for bringing up Unicorn Riot. We, as an independent media outlet ourselves, we definitely appreciate the work of independent journalists and photojournalists out there who are on the ground, literally risking life and limb in order to bring us the real deal of what's happening on the streets. And I think we do have a clip from Unicorn Riot from last night's protest in Minneapolis. Let's take a look.
Tonight is insane. When I tell you I have seen so much stuff, this is worse than even yesterday. They have literally blown up. I wouldn't even say blown up, but this police station is on fire, okay? This liquor store is blown up. They are tearing down these bus stations. They're doing it all. You know what I mean? We are literally posted at the police station exactly where they were standing. We are exactly where they were standing. We are taking a stand. I might not approve of the violence, but I will stand for my people tonight. I am standing for my people tonight. We are hurting. This is years and years of hurt. This is not just about George, and I can feel that. This is not about George anymore. This is the hurt. This is the pain. This is the people that we have lost. This is all of that. We are tired. You can see we are tired. We're tired. I have seen it all tonight. I have seen it all. Fireworks thrown into the fire and all. We are tired. Enough is enough. When are you just going to convict him? Just convict him. That's all we want. That's all we want. All of this could have been avoided. But the thing is, you allowed us to tear down our cities. You allowed us. You literally allowed us. What do you get from it? What are you getting from it? I don't get it. You had to be getting something out of us to allow us to destroy this much property. You are allowing us to. I don't get it. Power for the people. We're lit. Bring it in.
I mean, the anguish, the frustration, the rage, the sadness, the profound heartbreak that is coming out of that sister's voice right there. There's no way you could not be affected by what's happening in Minneapolis and other places. But I wanted to go to another clip because former Officer Chauvin, as I mentioned, had been arrested today. But yesterday, he was at home and he was chilling. And chilling, bro. And when people found out where he lived, they showed up to his house. But when they got there was some other folks already there waiting for them. Let's take a look at that.
Look how many fucking people are defending this killer's house. Look how fucking many are defending this killer's house. Look how fucking many are defending this killer's house. Look how fucking many are defending this killer's house. Look how fucking many. Look how fucking many. Look how fucking many. Look how fucking many are defending this killer's house. Look at this shit. Look at this shit. Look at this shit. Look how fucking many. They're defending a murderer's house. They are defending a murderer's house.
Yeah, lots of cops out there standing shoulder to shoulder defending the home of former Officer Coven. We have a comment from the comments panel. Sean Salisbury says, as a retired San Francisco, California Bay Area cop, I celebrate the fact that this cop was finally arrested, but I'm disgusted that it seems to always require mass protesting and massive free press coverage. Panel, I want to go around the horn and get your take on what he said, because if people had not taken to the streets, would Coven be in jail right now? Eddie, I'm going to start with you.
Oh, of course not. Of course not. And even the fact that he's in jail is meaningless because he can get indicted, he can get tried, and even sentenced, and then appeal and never see the inside of a jail cell. It's like 2%, I believe. Very few officers go to jail for crimes that they commit, where the other 98% get off, where the normal citizen would be under the prison.
Sorry.
Yeah, so I mean, absolutely not. And just by the sheer fact, I think Eddie brought it up, that we're getting killed so constantly that you literally can't keep up with how many cases. By the time, I mean, we were just talking about Breonna Taylor. There was a black trans man killed in Atlanta. So, I mean, all of these things are just coming out. I heard something about somebody in Toronto, even though this is outside the United States. I mean, who's to say what's going to happen tomorrow? Who's going to get killed the next day? So no, it wouldn't have been happen without a mass mobilization. And that's what needed to happen for it to be raised up to this point.
Eze Jackson.
Yeah, I think we can all see it's pretty obvious that the officer would not have been arrested had it not been for the uprising. And I just want to remind people who are worried about, the destruction of property and the fires and things like that. I just want to remind people that those buildings will be fine. CVS here in Baltimore on North Avenue in Pennsylvania is fine. It's thriving. It has been rebuilt. People are still going there, spending their money. These businesses are fine, but you can't replace Black lives. So I think that when people look at these riots and they say, oh, no, well, violence, and why do we have to do all that? It's a great question. Why does it come to that? Why does it have to come to that? Because before that, we would not have seen that. And we've seen that in Baltimore play out exactly the same way. The officers didn't get charged until the people uprised. So, it's absolutely clear that he would not have been charged. And it's disgusting that it took all of that for them to arrest him and still not the other three officers.
Adriel Hampton.
Yeah, I don't think it's just that he wouldn't have been, jailed if not everyone hadn't have seen it and there hadn't been this big outcry. I think it's that we're still upholding the system. It's police are an element of the capitalist system that is just crushing everyone right now, sending people back to work to die in a pandemic. I mean, this is like Trump steaming everybody up over this is helping escape the fact that it is Black and brown people and our elders who are getting killed by this pandemic, more than 100,000 people. And so this cop needs to be convicted, but we also need to abolish the police. What General Eddie said is what has to happen. We have to be able to protect our own communities with our own community standards, or else we're just getting kicked around by the police. And in Black Lives Matter LA, their big initiative right now is fighting a city budget in Los Angeles that's 54% for the police, like $3 billion for the police department. And people are waking up and realizing that's insane.
Gang, Obviously, Minneapolis is not the only place where these uprisings have been happening. After George Floyd's murder, people took to the streets in a lot of cities around the country, but not just for George Floyd, for other people in their respective communities who have also been murdered by the police. And now I want us to go and check out what's happening in Louisville, Kentucky. Of course, we're talking about Breonna Taylor, the 26-year-old woman who was an EMT, who was in her house minding her business. She was in bed asleep when plainclothes police officers executed a no-knock warrant, broke in her home. Her boyfriend, defending his castle as he was absolutely within his legal rights entitled to do, returned fire to the officers, but Breonna was shot 8 times. 8 times. She was shot 8 times in her home. The people of Louisville took to the streets also. We're going to take a look at some of that, what happened there.
Doug, we're across from Shea and looking across Jefferson. The crowd is now shaking the prisoner transport truck over there in front of Metro Hall. You can see it almost going up on 2 wheels at a time. We can hear that truck bouncing off of the ground as the crowd shakes it in front of Metro Hall. That's the area just off to the right where Shea was standing, just here on Jefferson. This is the first time that we've seen, at 11 o'clock was the first time that we really saw any activity any bit close to this tonight. Most of it had been very peaceful, and people had been, noisy and rowdy at times, but we hadn't seen bottles throwing and any movement on like that with cars. In fact, Philip, our chief photographer, we need to move while we're talking here because I think this guy's trying to get his truck off the sidewalk here. This truck parked in front of the bank. Or Allergy and Asthma Center now moving. We're going to move back down here closer to Jefferson so you can see the truck now, the transport unit now not being rocked. It appears, though, that someone is trying to smash out the windows on that truck. I can't tell whether there is any Metro officers inside that car or not right now, as people now who are parked on Jefferson are trying to come up into the sidewalk area where we're at, and they're trying to head east on Jefferson because they're blocked. We hear loud pops happening, and don't know what that was. People are now scattering. I'm ducked behind a wall. I've lost my photographer, Philip. He is somewhere else. People have moved. That was unclear whether that was a flashbang or whether someone was actually firing shots. I am not being. There's another shot or another explosion. I am ducked behind the PNC building as this is going on. Another one. Can't tell exactly where that's coming from and whether that is a flashbang, if that was to just deter the crowd, or whether that's something else.
That was reporter Chris Williams, WHAS News 11 in Louisville. Again, those people out in the streets to protest on behalf of Breonna Taylor. A sliver of encouraging news there. Her boyfriend had the charges against him dropped. He had been initially charged with attempted murder of police for defending his home. He had no idea that those were police coming into his house. So those charges, again, have been dropped. So that is always encouraging news. Other action is happening in Louisville where the chief of police has announced that he is resigning effective July 1st. That was something that organizers were calling for as well. And not that this means much, but it is, I guess, noteworthy that the FBI field office in Louisville say that they have opened an investigation into what happened to Breonna Taylor. Are the wheels of justice turning? Or wait, before I even get into that, let me just say that what we just witnessed with those gunshots, those were indeed gunshots. 7 people were shot in those protests. At least one is reported to be in critical condition, and it is unclear as to who fired those shots. Although I have theories, I think they need to check the service weapons of every cop out there and make sure every bullet was accounted for. Because as we have seen in Minneapolis, as well as organizers on the ground have said, that they suspect that there was, agent provocateurs in the crowd setting some of these fires. We have not been able to independently verify that, but this is just something that people have expressed that they believe / claim to have witnessed. Eddie, this is not a new tactic. where the cops themselves go out and start a lot of the shit that the protesters inevitably get blamed for.
Oh, yes. Obviously, not only do they have agent provocateurs, but they have undercover. The guy that was on the stage with Malcolm X when he got killed was a New York City police officer. The guy that set up Fred Hampton was an agent provocateur working for the FBI. So they infiltrate peaceful movements, NAACP, Christian movements, etc. And they're actually authorized to do that. Attorney General John Mitchell at some point authorized surveillance of any group of 10 plus people involved in any kind of activity in the United States. That's a memorandum that was put out and it's still in effect. And nobody pays any attention to it. Prior to that, they weren't allowed or they weren't legally allowed to infiltrate and spy on peaceful demonstrations. Now they are, once 10 people gather.
Eze Jackson, again, reminiscent of Baltimore 2015, when protesters were accused of breaking into the pharmacies and stealing the drugs. Well, come to find out, it was the police out there stealing the drugs while the protesters are getting blamed for it, bro. I mean, they stick to the script. These Bama's don't deviate too much. They run in the same plays every city for every generation, it seems.
Yeah, no, it's a fact. And I think, we've seen these examples of the agent provocateur in Chicago and St. Louis and Baltimore and now in Minnesota, which I think the footage of this officer has probably been publicized more than any of the others. But I think that, yes, for whatever reason, there are these agent provocateurs. And in Baltimore, I can speak to Baltimore, who had CBS and then finding out that there were officers involved. You still, can't forget that there were still real protesters there and people genuinely rioting because of the death of Freddie Gray, much like people in Minneapolis genuinely out there rioting and protesting because of the death of George Floyd. But with what happened with the CVS, what that started to do was that started to unveil a lot of the corruption that happens in Baltimore City Police Department. So this is part of the many things that led to the Gun Trace Task Force being unveiled and a lot of the other corruption cases that have been brought up. We went through 2 commissioners since Freddie Gray. We had a mayor that got caught up on corruption. I also want to point out, we were talking a little bit earlier about the mayor of Minneapolis and the governor of Minnesota and how they were not speaking in support of the police. And I think this is very indicative of the voters of Minneapolis and Minnesota, because here in Baltimore, we had a mayor at that time who got on national TV and called the young people who were protesting thugs, called our young people thugs. And what happened was a lot of people in Baltimore City looked up and said, Harpo, who this woman? They didn't know who the mayor was, because at the time we had a mayor who had only been voted in by a 12% voter turnout during the primary. So 12% of the registered adults in Baltimore City had turned out, and she won 7% of that vote. So when it came time for re-election to come, she did not run, because post Freddie Gray, a lot more people started paying attention. A lot more people started voting. So yes, we do have these agent provocateurs. I think we need to reveal them and expose them as much as possible. But we can't forget that there are real voices on the ground and there is real anguish happening. And Minneapolis, I think, as we watch in the coming months and years, you will probably see a big changeover in the leadership there because of this.
Panel, I made the mistake of cutting on cable news today. I know better. I know better. Why in the hell did I turn on CNN today? Why in the hell did I turn on MSNBC today? And when I had MSNBC on, I had it on mute and I was doing something else. And I looked up, damn if it wasn't Stephanie Rawlins Blake right there giving her opinions. I said, of all people, Y'all gonna ask Stephanie Rawlings Blake to comment on this? And Taure, you have been going in on the Black political elite in regards to the opportunistic ways that they have been commenting on not only this incident, but they use these incidents to sort of bolster their Blackness, right? Even though as they stand for policies that enable and engender these police to kind of act the way that they have been behaving. Talk to me about that, about why the Black political class uses these types of incidents to bolster themselves, meanwhile not doing shit to address the damn problem.
Yeah, well, I mean, the biggest part of it, is they have to maintain some sense of legitimacy among the masses of Black people. And the way that they do that is to be able to say, oh, well, look, I'm right here with you. I can see this egregious case. My son could have been this person, all these kind of different things. But what it allows them to do is kind of reaffirm their position as being the middle person between the white ruling class or the capitalist class and then the Black masses. And really what happens too is it's all about themselves. It's all about enriching their positions, their book deals, their other kind of things, government appointments, if we're talking about politicians. And it allows them to kind of share or express grievances with America without really critiquing what America is. If we're talking about capitalism, white supremacy, patriarchy, the ideologies and institutions that build up America and all the terrible shit that goes on in it. So Black elites are really just kind of like, this is a time for me to kind of reaffirm my Blackness through this. And I'm not saying that all Black political elites aren't impacted by this, right? I think that some of them do recognize like this is really fucked up. But there's a lot of them that also realize that the policing as an institution is fucked up. And rather than admitting that as a truth, they rather kind of paint it around as a bad apple kind of thing, because if they ever communicate that message, then they've automatically alienated themselves from that white ruling class.
Man,
I just want to say, Taure is absolutely right. Taure is absolutely fucking right. Because what happened in Baltimore was you had a changeover of guard because people started to look up and look at these Black politicians who have been representing certain areas, and some white politicians who have been representing certain areas that have been neglected for years. And these politicians are offered money. They're offered all kinds of endorsement and support from special interest groups that have a vested interest in keeping communities of color poor, keeping communities contained by police. You look at the zip code where Freddie Gray was murdered at that time, and maybe still at the time, the 21215 zip code had the highest level of marijuana arrests, even though studies have shown that Black and white marijuana smokers were at the same numbers. So in the areas where you have the same amount of marijuana white smokers, you don't have the same amount of arrests in an area where the median income is less than $30,000 and the average education level is GED or below. So I totally agree with Taure. A lot of politicians are using this opportunity to poise themselves and make themselves look good. And we can't forget that politics is a game. It's a game of money, and it's a game of exposure. And even if you make mistakes, if you keep at it, you can get those mistakes hidden and buried underground as long as you're coming out and saying the right thing at the right time. So it's up to the voters to be intelligent, to pay attention, and get involved and get even more active now.
From the comments, everybody, Black Man 903 says, referring to this particular topic, they clout chasing. Red says Glenn Ford calls them, quote, the Black misleadership class, for good reason, right?
Yep,
and Jamon 14 says they're doing it for money. And let me tell you, Stephanie Rawlings Blake, to her credit, she looked good. That Bloomberg money, baby. She put it to good use. She got her weave tight. Oh man, she looked beautiful. But she was still talking some bullshit, but she definitely looked beautiful. Gang, I want us to move along because, like I said, there was demonstrations and uprisings, protests, a variety of places. But in addition to the police, doing what the police do against protesters, ordinary white citizens are sometimes taking matters into their own hands to voice and display how much they disapprove of Black resistance. Let's look at this video that happened in Denver involving a person driving an SUV into a group of protesters. Let's take a look.
Oh, yeah.
Watch out! Oh my God, he's
That video right there, courtesy of Redfish. Obviously, gang, we saw, similar scenes happening in Charlottesville not too long ago, where the white supremacists were marching on Charlottesville. There was a counter march, and Sister Heather Heyer ended up losing her life in an incident just like that. Adriel, we know white privilege exists. We know that there is sort of protection in whiteness, but at the same time, if you show up as an ally, I mean, you are not without risk in incidents like this. Talk to us about, I guess the sort of moxie it takes for, a white person to stand out there and stand shoulder to shoulder with oppressed, marginalized people and potentially end up being the victim of violence themselves.
Right. Yeah. I want to lift up my friend Richie Sergenko, who's organizing in LA as an ally with Black Lives Matter. And he was out at one of these protests in LA. And when the police on 101 was being blocked by the protesters, and the CHP kind of peeled through the protesters at some speed, one guy was bounced off the roof and onto the road. And Richie goes sprinting after him and then got a motorist to go take a picture and then stop. He ran up to the motorist, got the picture of the guys, and was able to put out the license plate number. But then he's like in that position of, now I'm a target, now I'm part of this, right? And I think that what it takes is people stepping into the shoes of just someone who has a different skin color, who's oppressed because of their skin color, right? We have to make the choice to step into it. And that's kind of what I would hope that more people, as this becomes more and more visible, because I do a lot of social media monitoring, and I think this is pretty darn big, particularly because everyone's already amped up about the pandemic. They're at home, they're watching Facebook, they're watching streams, is to challenge more people to take that step of empathy, to put yourself into the risk of standing out, of speaking out. People are saying on Twitter, I feel that people really want to talk about this, like white people, but they're still scared to say it. And I think that we can't be scared to say it, or else we're going to continue to see Black people beaten and killed by police. And we're also feeling that same oppression. If it can happen to someone else, it can happen to you. And we can't. I appreciate what you were saying, Eddie, about the anger beneath the demeanor when you've been oppressed, when you've been beaten, when you've been arrested. And I think that we have more solidarity in that than we let on. And that's my challenge to other white folks.
I'm reminded of when the brother, his name was Stephon Clark, he was shot and killed in his grandmother's backyard. This happened in Sacramento, California, 2018. And I wish I'd have thought to pull this video because it was so striking. So at a subsequent city council meeting of Sacramento City Council, Stephon's brother stood up in the meeting and just shut the shit down, right? And as the police sort of started to converge upon him, white people surrounded him, right? And the cops backed off. It was magic, like the magic of white skin, yo. The shit is amazing, right? It can repel the cops from attacking, Black people in certain instances. And that's the odd thing to me about white liberal allyship, because to me, that is an act of solidarity, to put your body between police who are coming to probably do harm to a Black person, and say the faux solidarity of someone like an Amy Cooper, the woman who called the police on Christian Cooper in Central Park over the weekend, who was identified as a Democrat, as a liberal, who donated to Barack Obama and Pete Buttigieg, but didn't hesitate to use her whiteness as a weapon to say, you know, I'm being threatened by African American man, fully understanding all the weight and potential consequence that statement entailed. I'll let y'all respond to that as you will, if anyone wants to.
I would like to just chime in on that real quick, is because I had an opportunity to talk to Stefan's brother right after that. I was actually still with y'all at the Real News, and we wanted to bring him on. And we ended up not being able to bring him on because his lawyers wouldn't let him. But I remember having a conversation with him on the phone. And one of the things that stick out to me is he said to me, bruh, I never would have thought them white people would ever step in there for me. I never seen white people do no shit like that in my life. Talking about the incident at the city council hearing. And so I think when you look at examples like that, my man Adriel is absolutely right. You know, this is what he said afterwards. He said, this ain't even about black and white no more, bro. This is about right and wrong. You know, that experience alone gave him a different perspective of the white people he had known and experienced up to that point. You know what I'm saying? And for him, he realized it wasn't just about me. It wasn't just about my brother. This is about all of us. And that conversation really sticks out to me about that.
Yeah, I just wanted to bring in a little bit. So like my baseline for white allies or white comrades is John Brown. So, you know, you gotta you got some catching up to do, my brother. but all in seriousness, when I thought about Amy Cooper, you know, and this relationship, just to go back a quick bit, what we talked about, like the black elites, you know, these same kind of folks support similar politicians, will claim to care about black people, right? I'm sure even Amy Cooper, during her conversations justifying her vote for Barack Obama, about, you know, how race is not a big factor or something like that. I'm just thinking about now, those same black politicians share the same kind of politics as those folks. I'm thinking specifically about New York State Attorney General, I think her name is Tish James, who just recently denied the release of Jaleel Muntaqim after a judge already granted a release, I think, of courts. And now Jaleel has contracted the coronavirus. So this is a black politician in the position, and Tish just literally sent out a tweet maybe a couple hours ago talking about Floyd's murder and how terrible it is. But here you are in the position of power, using your authority to pretty much threaten the life of an elder black freedom fighter. So I just wanted to bring that contradiction out again.
Eddie or Adriel, would you guys like to weigh in on that?
I'm muted.
Nope. Okay.
I want to add the only way the capitalist system actually works, and the only way it can continue to work, and it's running out of steam even as I'm saying this, is divide and conquer. The worst nightmare that capitalists can have is to have unity down on the ground among all the different races, because then they can't play one group against the other. And that is the problem that they have right now. That's why they're militarizing the police. They're arming to the teeth the militias, because they cannot stand for that unity. And that unity is what we should be supporting and what we should be encouraging. And John Browns will come. But along with John Browns, we need Nat Turners and Charles DeAnts and so on. But unity is the key to breaking this whole system.
Adriel, I'll let you get the last comment on this one.
Yeah, I would just add that you talked about watching CNN today, Van Jones coming out and saying that just because you vote for Hillary Clinton doesn't mean you're right on these issues. That was a moment because the Democratic Party is not able to hold that line of we're on the right side of these things. And that's what we're seeing in Minneapolis as well, with the Democratic politicians being slow to act. And they're having to react to the people. When even CNN is starting to use lines that are questioning the Democratic Party's ability to harness the people's rage, that says a lot to me.
Well, speaking of politics, everybody, President Donald Trump, of course, weighed in on what's happening in Minneapolis, and he's been invoking the name of George Floyd quite a bit. But, as crazy as Trump talks generally, I mean, he went really just way out there recently in comments, so much so that Twitter actually took the unprecedented step, at least as it relates to him, to actually flag his tweet for so-called inciting violence. And this is the tweet. It's on your screen right now. It reads, "These thugs are dishonoring the memory of George Floyd, and I won't let that happen. Just spoke with Governor Tim Walz and told him the military is with him all the way. Any difficulty and we will assume control. But when the looting starts, the shooting starts. Thank you." Holy shit. If that doesn't sound like a threat to all the people who are out there in the streets. Now, as you see, Twitter says at the very top, it says this tweet violated the Twitter rules about glorifying violence. However, Twitter has determined that it may be in the public's interest for this tweet to remain accessible. Well, it's not the first time that Trump has called for violence against particular groups. Certainly not the first time that, Trump has used his platform of 80-some million followers to do exactly that. Now, Dwayne, I want to go to his revised tweets because the motherfucker tried to walk it back just a little bit, but we know you said what you said, Trump. We know you said what you said. Let's look at that. So he said, "Looting leads to shooting, and that's why a man was shot and killed in Minneapolis on Wednesday night." Or look at what just happened in Louisville with 7 people shot. "I don't want this to happen, and that's what the expression put out last night means." He went on to say, it was spoken as fact, not as a statement. If nobody would have had any problem with this other than the haters and those looking to cause trouble on social media. Honor the memory of George Floyd. So, Trump feels as if that he and other conservatives are being censored. He feels that specifically Twitter, Google, and Facebook, he's kind of called them by name, but Twitter more specifically, are censoring him, holding him back in some way. I think a lot of people would probably say it's the contrary, that no, Twitter has actually allowed way too much of Trump's hate speech to just fly on his massive platform. Adriel, talk to us about this executive order that Donald Trump has, or he's under the impression that he is able to enforce against social media. There's been so much happening. I need clarity.
Right. No, it is. Well, some time back, the conservatives keep rolling out this idea that they're being censored because what it does is it allows them to get away with more and more. And if you think about it, liberals, particularly Democrats, are a little more timid than like the right has become in the last 10 years in particular. And by putting out this order that they had drafted apparently several months ago in response to that very innocuous, description of the tweet. And I guess it's interesting that he's making an argument saying this isn't a tweet about violence, it's a tweet about violence, right? He doesn't even know what it means. But he's threatening these companies with losing their rights as a platform under something called Section 230. And my understanding of the order is that Wilbur Ross, the Secretary of Commerce, is now supposed to go to the FCC and get them to do an investigation or create orders to potentially revoke Section 230 privileges. And Section 230 just says that Facebook, Google, Twitter, the Real News can't get sued for things in their comment section. And so if you lose your Section 230 status, you basically can't publish on the internet with any kind of commentary that comes from third parties. And that would totally ruin Facebook, ruin Twitter. And then you saw Mark Zuckerberg say, "Oh, I don't think we should, make any determinations." And so you now have Facebook firmly in Trump's camp. You have Twitter fighting with him. It's pretty interesting.
Yeah, we're sort of seeing the ways now. I mean, not just right now, but just in general, social media is a powerful tool for organizing, right? I mean, it can be used for good and evil. And, Taure, I know you're extremely active on social media. You have a pretty sizable platform, but at the same time, I know that Twitter would have no problem yanking your shit if you started talking extra reckless, but yet the president gets away with this, and he's the most powerful person in the world.
Yeah, I'm surprised they haven't snatched my shit yet, but I'm thankful I'm still here. I try to keep a chameleon kind of thing going on, and since I went to graduate school, so now the bourgeois folks have taught me how to dress up the shit I'm supposed to say. So I'm still saying the same shit, but just with better words that make them feel a little bit easier. But yeah, it's just social media, I think, is a powerful way to connect with folks. But yes, there are a lot of bad things that can happen. If you're talking about trying to build a movement just off of social media, that's not the way you're going to do it. I mean, it's one of the easiest ways to be surveilled, to tap into your stuff. I figure as soon as you get an iPhone, you get an agent assigned to you at the same time. But yeah, I mean, just from Trump's tweets, I just think it was one part I thought was really ironic is that Twitter says, "Oh, his tweets are glorifying violence," but you have the U.S. military have all kinds of Twitter pages where they show videos of them dropping bombs and all these kind of standing beside literally weapons of mass murder every single day. So it's kind of ironic. I get it. They're kind of pushing back on Trump. But yeah, it's the same old shit, different day.
Hey, gang, let's take a look at Joe Biden's response. I know we're all a bunch of Joe Biden fans here, right? Everyone's voting for Joe Biden.
Yes, go Joe.
No? Yeah? Biden 2020. This is a Biden. And of course, I'm being super sarcastic. Please don't tell us that we Joe Biden people. So Joe Biden very poignantly tweeted, "Enough." Oh, that's a tough stance right there, Joe Biden. Yep, that Trump is going to wax that ass, bruh. Okay, Joe Biden also said it's not an abstract. A black reporter was arrested. How come these tweets be cutting off on my screen, Dwayne? I can't read them all, but was arrested for doing his job this morning while the white police officer, he actually said white police officer who killed George Floyd remains free. I'm glad swift action was taken, but this to me says everything. Does it, sir? Is there another tweet from Joe Biden? Yep, Joe Biden said, "I will not lift the president's tweet. I will not give him that amplification, but he is calling for violence against American citizens during a moment of pain for so many. I'm furious, and you should be too." I think there's another one. Is there another one? Okay, that's it. That's plenty from Joe Biden, sir. That's enough out of you. The irony, folks, of lock 'em up Joe, having in any sort of temerity to finger wag Donald Trump. I mean, we all know Donald Trump is terrible, but this notion that Joe Biden is somehow less terrible, I guess, than Trump is something that is completely laughable. Eddie, I'll let you take the first shot at this one.
Yeah, well, the whole political system, the way it's been arranged, is a circus act, really. I mean, every 4 years we get to pick one of the choices that the ruling class allows us to vote for, and we get bamboozled every 4 years. And so Biden or any of the rest of them, perhaps there was a little something in Sanders' campaign, but pretty much if you are running the empire, like Obama was running the empire, you are going to be against oppressed people all over the world.
Adriel, political perspective, Joe Biden has been widely criticized for not being tough enough with Donald Trump. I mean, these tweets don't speak toughness to me, given the sort of monster that Trump is. What is your take on Joe Biden's response to Donald Trump advocating once again for violence via his Twitter platform?
The one thing I liked about it was that he didn't amplify Trump's tweet, because I think that's a problem that a lot of people who want to be big on Twitter, they amplify stuff from the right. They'll even use videos that the right wing made, like attacking other leftists, that kind of thing. So that was good, but it did feel kind of weak. It did fall into the kind of low energy Biden, because it was like, I'm so mad, but it didn't really read so mad. And I think I don't know, I couldn't even imagine him doing a video of him saying the same thing. And I think they need to if he's just a vehicle for the Democratic Party right now to try to beat Trump, don't try to make him the pugilist who's in there with Trump. Find other figures to do that. That's my advice.
Mm. Taure, the irony of Joe Biden describing how furious he is at Donald Trump for making these comments and, referencing the fact that George Floyd, a black man, was killed by a white officer. Meanwhile, you don't have enough fingers and toes to count how many black people were killed by police unjustifiably. They were unarmed or other reasons during the Obama administration, when Joe Biden was actually in the White House, perhaps in a position to maybe, to take some sort of policy action there. But he's furious right now.
Yeah, he's furious, but not furious enough to do anything about the millions of lives he destroyed through the crime bill, the 1994 crime bill, or during his years in the Obama administration. So again, it just plays to this idea, you're furious about this obviously egregious incident because it allows you to say, oh, I'm for black people, or I'm doing something for you, but pushes away from what Eddie was talking about, how the system in itself is designed in a certain kind of way to oppress people, and that you're either on the side of the people or you're on the side of the empire. And Joe Biden represents the empire, the U.S. empire. So again, it's all lip service, political theater, very poor political theater. Maybe you should have saved that for Simone to tweet out, right? But it felt weak. It is weak. I mean, it's Joe Biden. It's pretty damn ironic. But again, it just speaks to how people tend to play to these episodes and not get to what's at the crux of the matter, and that's the system itself.
Eze Jackson, I'll let you have the last word.
There's one word in those tweets that really bothered me, and that's swift. He says, I'm thankful for the swift action. So by his definition, swift action is several days later, after hundreds of thousands of millions of dollars of property damage, taxpayer money, the National Guard being called in, the president inciting violence, the officer's house being surrounded by an army of police officers to protect that officer. His definition is that was swift action. I think it was the mayor of Minnesota, mayor of Minneapolis, who said, if it was any one of us, we would have been locked up. That's swift action. Right after it happens, you're arrested, you are locked up, and you are detained and guilty until proven innocent. In reality, for us American citizens, that's how it works. This is not swift action. And I think Joe Biden needs to come a lot harder in saying, listen, we got us here. We did this. He needs to own it and come out and say, we did this. We got us here. We stood on the stage and said, kill and murder people doing and selling drugs. He got on the stage and did that. They created this atmosphere that we have now. And until I hear Joe Biden own that, with conviction and tenacity, I don't believe shit he has to say. And I don't care nothing about people saying, it's a vote for Trump if you don't vote for Joe Biden. Bullshit. They are the reason why we are here. They created this atmosphere. This is what you wanted. This is what you called for.
We're going to let that lay right there, ladies and gentlemen. I'd like to thank the panel for a fantastic, dynamic conversation. We've been joined with Eze Jackson, Taure Brown, Adriel Hampton, and of course, Eddie Conway. Gentlemen, thank you all so much for making the time to join us here on Stir Crazy. Your comments and insight, perspective, much, much appreciated and valued. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, thank you.
Thanks to all of you.
Hey, gang, I just want to remind everybody out there watching, you have a good, safe weekend. The coronavirus is still out there, okay? I don't give a shit if your state is open up. I don't give a shit if your state is open wide right now. Keep in mind, the corona is still waiting to jump on that ass. So please be cautious, be smart, and be safe. We want to see you back here Monday for the next episode of Stir Crazy. I'm your host, Kim Brown. Y'all be easy and have a great weekend. See you later.